Have you ever looked at a leader and thought, how did someone like that get there? Not with admiration, but with disbelief. Not because they were extraordinary, but because they were so clearly unqualified. It feels like a glitch in the system. But what if it isn't? What if the system isn't broken, but working exactly as it was designed? This is the haunting truth we rarely say aloud, that power doesn't always ascend through wisdom, competence, or moral strength. It often ascends through something far more shallow: performance. In today's world, the throne doesn't go to the thinker, the careful planner, the self-aware mind. It goes to the loudest voice in the room, the boldest promise, the best illusion. The game is rigged not by corruption alone, but by our very instincts as human beings. Because we don't reward those who understand complexity. We reward those who simplify it, who promise certainty, who appear strong even when they are not. Machiavelli saw it centuries ago. He didn't write for utopians. He didn't describe how the world should work. He wrote for those with the courage to see how it really works. And what he found was chilling. The people who rise to power are not always the best. They are the ones who perform best. Everyone sees what you appear to be. Few experience what you truly are. With that one sentence, he dismantled centuries of idealism. Because behind every powerful fool lies a society that mistook confidence for character, charisma for competence, spectacle for substance. And the damage, it's not just policy failure or mismanagement, it's the silencing of the wise, the erasure of the thoughtful, the burying of potential. Every time we elevate a showman, we push aside a thinker. Every time we choose the comfortable lie, we abandon the difficult truth. We don't just lose good leadership, we lose what could have been a better future. This isn't random, it's predictable. We are psychologically wired to crave clarity. In chaos, we flock to whoever offers the simplest answer, even if it's wrong. That's how weak leaders rise. They feed on fear, offer certainty, and package themselves as saviors. Meanwhile, the cautious, the ethical, the brilliant, those who see the shades of gray are cast aside for being indecisive, too quiet, or not strong enough. But here's what no one tells you. Intelligence hesitates because it sees the cost. Conscience pauses because it understands the weight of power. It is not weakness, it's depth. But in a shallow system, depth drowns, and surface floats. So the next time you wonder why the arrogant rise while the wise are silenced, remember this: it's not a flaw in the system. It's the system itself. One that rewards image over essence. One that confuses leadership with showmanship. One that does not see clearly, but only reacts emotionally. Until we fix how we choose power, we will continue to hand the microphone to those who shout, not those who think. Because foolish people don't stumble into power by accident. They are selected by a world that no longer values truth, but only the appearance of it. Centuries ago, Niccolò Machiavelli dared to say what others feared, that power does not belong to the most intelligent, the most moral, or even the most qualified. Power belongs to those who understand the theater of perception. In his brutally honest writings, he shattered the idealistic belief that truth naturally rises to the top. He replaced it with a darker, but far more accurate principle: everyone sees what you appear to be. Few experience what you truly are. Machiavelli wasn't glorifying deception. He was exposing the rules of the game. He saw how the world truly operates in politics, in leadership, and in human nature. Those who appear strong, decisive, and confident, regardless of their actual competence, are the ones who capture attention, trust, and loyalty. Meanwhile, the wise, the hesitant, the reflective are often overlooked, not because they lack value, but because they lack spectacle. This brutal truth still echoes today. We live in a world of optics, a world where appearances dominate outcomes, where a firm handshake and a confident tone often outweigh knowledge and nuance. From political campaigns to boardrooms, from social media to corporate leadership. Those who look like leaders are chosen over those who think like them. Machiavelli understood that most people don't seek truth, they seek relief. Relief from uncertainty, from fear, from doubt. And anyone who can deliver that relief, even through illusion, gains power. It's not about being good, it's about being convincing. It's not about knowing the answers, it's about sounding like you do. This insight is not just historical, it's urgent. Because every time we forget it, we repeat the cycle. We hand over power not to those who are capable of solving real problems, but to those who are skilled at looking like they can. And then we wonder why systems fail. Machiavelli's genius wasn't cruelty, it was clarity. He held up a mirror to human nature and dared us to look, not to become cynical, but to stop being naive, until we understand that power flows through perception. We'll keep empowering the most convincing mask, not the most capable mind. One of the most unsettling insights of modern psychology is that the people who know the least often believe they know the most. This isn't a fluke. It's a measurable, well-documented cognitive bias called the Dunning-Kruger Effect. And it explains perhaps better than anything else why so many unqualified individuals rise to positions of power. It's not because they've fooled others, it's because they've first fooled themselves. This effect describes a paradox of self-perception. Those with limited knowledge or skill lack the very insight they need to recognize their own limitations. As a result, they project unwarranted confidence. They speak in absolutes. They declare solutions to complex problems with unwavering certainty. Meanwhile, truly competent individuals, those who grasp the nuance, the complexity, the risks, often hesitate. They second-guess. They say, "I don't know," not out of weakness, but from awareness. But here's the tragedy. The world doesn't reward caution. It doesn't reward quiet thoughtfulness. It rewards certainty, even false certainty. And so, in leadership, in media, in influence, the voices that rise are often not the wisest, but the loudest. The very people who should be leading those with intelligence, humility, and foresight are drowned out by those too ignorant to recognize their ignorance. Machiavelli would have seen this coming. He didn't have the language of cognitive science, but he understood human nature. He knew that people gravitate toward strength and clarity, even when it's artificial. And in a chaotic world, there's almost nothing more seductive than someone who sounds completely sure of themselves. The Dunning-Kruger effect doesn't just explain political failure, it explains cultural collapse. When overconfidence is mistaken for competence, entire systems become vulnerable. Institutions lose credibility. Decisions are made for optics, not outcomes. And those who see through it, they're sidelined, mocked, or ignored. If we want to stop empowering the unqualified, we must first recognize this bias in ourselves. We must stop confusing confidence with capability. We must stop mistaking volume for value. And we must start listening to the quiet minds, the ones who think before they speak, who question before they act. Because more often than not, those who hesitate to lead are the only ones truly fit to. In a world obsessed with performance, charisma often outweighs competence. The one who speaks with flair, who commands attention with bold gestures and unwavering tone, is celebrated even when their ideas are hollow. Meanwhile, the truly competent, those grounded in reality logic and long-term thinking, are dismissed for being too cautious, too boring, or too complex. This isn't just unfair, it's dangerous. Because when charisma becomes a shortcut to credibility, we don't just elevate the wrong people, we silence the right ones. History and headlines alike are filled with examples. Politicians who promise sweeping solutions without plans, CEOs who raise billions with buzzwords and charm, influencers who command millions of followers by projecting confidence, not knowledge. What do they have in common? They perform certainty. They radiate belief in themselves even if the foundation is shaky or non-existent. And because humans are wired to equate confidence with competence, we buy into the illusion. Machiavelli predicted this centuries ago. He knew that power lies not in being right, but in sounding right. That appearance often crushes substance. And in a media-saturated society where every leader is part politician, part performer, that principle has only grown stronger. The person who hesitates, who says it depends, or we need more data, is passed over. They don't inspire, they don't excite. But the one who speaks in absolutes, who reduces complex realities to simple slogans, they win elections, they close deals, they lead movements. This reward system fuels a cycle of illusion. Overconfidence becomes a strategy, not a flaw. the bold rise quickly gaining status and influence not through results but through performance. And by the time reality catches up, by the time the cracks show, it's often too late. The damage is done. The truly competent were never even given the microphone. If we want better outcomes, we must shift what we reward. We must value clarity over charisma, substance over style, honesty over hype. Because when the world listens only to the confident, it turns its back on the wise. And when leadership becomes theater, society becomes the audience cheering for its own manipulation. One of the most disturbing traits of incompetent leaders is their fear of competence in others. Deep down, they know they're unqualified. And instead of rising to the challenge, they protect their position by surrounding themselves with people who will never outshine them. They don't build teams, they build fortresses. And those fortresses aren't made of skill or strategy. They're made of loyalty, flattery, and mediocrity. Machiavelli warned us about this centuries ago. The first method for estimating the intelligence of a ruler is to look at the men he has around him. If a leader surrounds himself with weak, obedient subordinates who never challenge or question him, you can be certain he's not strong. He's afraid. Strong leaders welcome challenge. Weak ones silence it. This fear of being exposed creates a toxic culture. Talented individuals either leave, are pushed out, or are forced to shrink themselves to survive. Innovation dies. Truth becomes dangerous, and soon the entire system becomes an echo chamber, one that punishes merit and promotes loyalty at all costs. It happens in corporations. It happens in governments. It happens in every space where insecure power is left unchecked. And here's the tragedy: the longer this dynamic is allowed to fester, the harder it becomes to reverse. Incompetent leaders often appoint even weaker successors, people who will protect the status quo, not improve it. What starts as a defensive strategy becomes institutional decay. Criticism is rebranded as disloyalty. Questions are punished. Obedience becomes the only currency that buys influence. And as the system rots from the inside out, the people it was meant to serve, citizens, employees, consumers, are the ones who pay the price. This isn't just incompetence by accident, it's incompetence by design, a deliberate rejection of excellence built to protect fragile egos rather than build real progress. And it's not rare, it's everywhere. If you've ever been told to stop asking questions, or felt like truth was the enemy in your workplace or institution, you've seen this sickness firsthand. True leadership isn't afraid of talent, it elevates it. And any system that rewards silence over skill is a system designed to fail. When the world feels uncertain, people don't look for truth, they look for comfort. In moments of crisis, fear, or confusion, the human mind craves clarity, even if it's false. We are psychologically wired to reach for whatever voice sounds most certain, not the one that's most correct. And this is precisely where manipulative, incompetent leaders thrive. Machiavelli saw this flaw long before modern psychology named it. He wrote, "The great majority of mankind are satisfied with appearances as though they were realities." He understood that in times of instability, people prefer the illusion of safety over the discomfort of truth. Today, psychologists call this cognitive closure a mental shortcut where we cling to simple answers to escape uncertainty. It's why bold slogans beat nuanced explanations, why populist leaders gain traction with sweeping promises, why scientists with complex data are ignored in favor of commentators with strong opinions. The brain wants to believe someone is in control, even if that control is a lie. In this climate, the most manipulative rise by offering false certainty. They simplify the complex, give us someone to blame, and promise easy solutions. And the more afraid we are, the more we want to believe them. Truth becomes inconvenient. Doubt becomes weakness. And those who speak honestly, who admit complexity, are viewed as indecisive. But here's the cost. When we choose comfort over clarity, we surrender control. We hand power to those who tell us what we want to hear, not what we need to know. And slowly we stop asking questions. We stop thinking critically. We stop seeing reality for what it is. If we don't learn to tolerate discomfort, to sit with the uncertainty truth often brings, we will continue to fall for polished illusions. And those illusions will cost us more than we realize. Intelligence alone is not enough to rise in a world that prizes boldness over depth. In fact, in many systems of power, intelligence becomes a burden, a silent weight that holds back those most capable of leading. Why? Because true intelligence doesn't shout. It hesitates, it questions, it sees complexity where others see simplicity. And in a society obsessed with certainty, caution is mistaken for weakness. The most thoughtful people often hold back because they understand the consequences of every word. They see not just what can be gained, but what might be lost. They wrestle with ethics. They calculate the human cost. They ask themselves if the power is worth the compromise. And while they pause to reflect, the ruthless move forward, fast, loud, and without hesitation. Machiavelli warned that a leader who wishes to survive must learn how not to be good. He didn't say this with admiration. He said it with clarity. In a system that rewards illusion and punishes restraint, morality is often a strategic disadvantage. The intelligent flinch at lying. The manipulator turns deception into a weapon. And as long as the game is rigged to reward performance over principle, those with conscience will remain stuck at the bottom, respected, perhaps, but rarely followed. We've seen it throughout history. Great minds and ethical leaders are often defeated not by better ideas, but by bolder lies. Their depth, their humility, their refusal to simplify truth makes them difficult to follow in a world that demands quick answers. And so, society chooses charm over substance, certainty over wisdom, confidence over caution. The cost. We lose the very minds that could guide us through chaos. Intelligence without strategy is not rewarded, it's rejected, and that is one of the greatest tragedies of our time. We often believe that the solution to bad leadership is simply to find better people, smarter ones, kinder ones, more qualified ones. But Machiavelli knew better. He understood that the problem isn't always the person in power, it's the system that allowed them to get there. You can replace the leader, but if the structure remains the same, the outcome will repeat. The truth is, power doesn't exist in a vacuum. It thrives or dies based on the environment around it. In well-designed systems, incompetence is exposed quickly. Think of a surgeon. If their patients keep dying, they can't hide behind charisma. The results speak for themselves. But in politics, media, or business where success is harder to measure and feedback is delayed or distorted, deception becomes easier to maintain. A lie can be spun a failure, blamed on others, and a false image carefully curated. That's why Machiavelli emphasized structure. If we want power to reward integrity instead of illusion, we need to design systems that demand it. Systems with checks and balances, independent oversight, and clear feedback mechanisms. Systems where truth matters more than charm, where bad results can't be hidden behind good performance, where honesty is not just a virtue, but a requirement. Transparency must be embedded at every level. When power hides behind secrecy jargon or spectacle, manipulation thrives. But when decision-making is exposed to light, when the public can see, question, and measure outcomes, the mask falls away. Power becomes accountable. We must stop dreaming of perfect leaders and start building resilient structures. Structures that are stronger than ambition, immune to seduction, and built to withstand the games people play. Because in the end, the system determines what kind of leadership survives. And if we want competence, ethics, and truth to prevail, we must design for them, not just hope for them. In today's world, incompetent leaders don't just rise, they stay. Not through wisdom or results, but through psychological manipulation. They don't lead with truth, they rule with illusion. And the tools they use aren't new. They're ancient instincts repackaged with modern precision: tribalism, fear, chaos, and confusion. Machiavelli warned us, but now science confirms it. These tactics exploit the very way our brains are wired. First, there's tribalism. Weak leaders link their identity to that of a group, nation, religion, race ideology, so that any criticism of them feels like an attack on their followers. This creates identity fusion where loyalty to the leader becomes a survival instinct. Logic dies in the face of loyalty. Facts no longer matter, only allegiance. Next, they create chaos and cognitive overload. They flood the media with constant drama scandals and shifting narratives, not to inform, but to exhaust. The brain, overwhelmed, reaches for shortcuts, and that's when manipulation strikes. When we're too tired to think clearly, we cling to whoever sounds most confident, even if they're wrong. Then comes confusion through contradiction, what Orwell called doublethink. Leaders say one thing today, the opposite tomorrow, and expect blind acceptance. Over time, people stop trying to make sense of the lies. They become numb, passive, controllable. Finally, they weaponize fear, economic insecurity, social unrest, cultural anxiety. When people are afraid, they stop questioning. They search for safety, and the leader becomes the illusion of protection, even if they created the danger in the first place. This isn't incompetence by accident. It's strategy, a fortress built not from truth but from psychological warfare. And worst of all, it works. Machiavelli didn't admire these tactics. He revealed them. And if we don't understand how they're used against us, we will continue to follow those who manipulate emotion instead of guiding with reason. Because in a world ruled by fear, clarity is rebellion, and truth is the only weapon that cannot be faked. In a world saturated with noise illusion and strategic deception, the battlefield is no longer just political, it's psychological. And the only defense we truly have doesn't come from outside, it comes from within. Not through force, but through awareness, intellectual humility, and disciplined reflection. In a time when perception outweighs truth, these internal qualities are no longer just virtues, they're survival tools. Awareness is the first line of defense. The ability to notice when emotion is being used as a weapon, when simplicity is masking complexity, when certainty is being sold as truth. Most people don't fall for lies because they're foolish. They fall because they're overwhelmed, distracted, and desperate for clarity. Awareness cuts through that fog. It allows us to pause, to question, to resist the pull of the performance. Then comes intellectual humility, the rare courage to admit what we don't know. Studies show that people who are intellectually humble are more resilient to manipulation. They evaluate evidence more carefully. They resist emotional traps. They're less likely to confuse loudness with leadership or charisma with character. In a world addicted to certainty, humility is a revolutionary act. Finally, we need philosophical reflection, the ability to step back and ask, what do I believe? Why do I believe it? Who benefits from my loyalty, my outrage, my distraction? This kind of reflection doesn't make you weak, it makes you free. It's how you reclaim your mind from those who want to use it. Machiavelli exposed the mechanics of manipulation, but he also left us a warning: if you don't understand the game, you will be used by it. And in a society where spectacle sells faster than substance, the most powerful act you can take is to see clearly and choose slowly. Because once your mind is truly your own, you become untouchable not by hiding from power, but by refusing to be fooled by its mask. In a world where perception often matters more than truth, the most dangerous leaders aren't always evil. They're incompetent people who appear confident. And that should deeply concern us, because when we reward style over substance, charisma over character, and certainty over complexity, we end up placing power in the hands of those least equipped to handle it. The lesson is simple, but urgent. Don't be fooled by confidence alone. The loudest voice isn't always the wisest. The most certain person isn't always right. And leadership isn't proven by how strongly someone speaks, but by what happens after they speak. To protect yourself and your community, you must cultivate 3 things: awareness, intellectual humility, and critical thinking. Learn to question what feels too easy, too perfect, or too absolute. Truth is often messy, slow, and uncertain, but it's worth the discomfort. In your personal life, apply this by valuing people who think deeply, not just talk boldly. In your workplace, speak up when systems reward loyalty over competence. In your community, don't follow leaders because they look the part. Follow those who earn your trust through substance, not performance. Machiavelli didn't ask us to be cynical. He asked us to stop being naive. And in today's chaotic world, that might be the most powerful survival skill of all: to see clearly, think critically, and never mistake a confident mask for true leadership.